All right, thank you for joining me. As you guys know, I am Tarnish, and today I wanted to go over and kind of just watch and react to the interview between Ion Hazzikostas and another community figure. His name is Preach. If you're not familiar with World of Warcraft, he's a YouTuber. Basically, they're going over and having a Q&A. So this is something that obviously MMO Avengers is interested in because we're trying to put information out there so these developers can take that information and try and make the game better. So we actually just recently did a World of Warcraft retail podcast it was with me and Rick Caillou. And for some reason, I wish we had thought about doing that one after this. But then at the same time, I don't know, because we're trying to go over these broad subjects and kind of slowly, progress them through podcasts so that you guys get a general idea of what things are like in that game, and then getting the more nitty gritty as we continue to go on. So this is Ion. This dude back in the day, but I'm pretty sure he was an Elitist Jerks, which was just the main go-to website in order to figure out the cookie cutter builds for your class, whatever the case may be. He later, I guess, a lot of those guys end up becoming employees of Blizzard over the years. And I'm pretty sure he's one of them, if not the head guy. So now he's the head of World of Warcraft, I guess, development. So anyways, I just want to go into this. Is about an hour long, guys. I'm going to pause here or there and just give you guys feedback of like, are these things good or bad? And then am I disappointed or not? Or some of these reactions will kind of get you a little confused. You're like, wow, like they're just okay, So anyways, let's get into it. It's going to be a little bit of a long video for just me. So I just want to get it going.
During our little pre-chat there is pleasing everybody in World of Warcraft ain't an easy task.
Yep, even winning is disappointing 99% of your audience. Enjoy.
It is. I did want to talk, first of all, like, 9.0 has been such a long time, like, comparative to other starter patches. But we did have Shadowlands delayed. 9.1, we don't have a release date yet. I just wanted if you like to talk to that to get us started about any issues you guys have had with development or what's been happening over your side, just to fill us in a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that this is not the ideal release cadence for our content, for our game. I think we would prefer, frankly, to have. I prefer to be sitting here right now talking to you, announcing that Chains of Domination is coming out in just a couple weeks, and you have a bunch of new raid content to jump into and a new zone to explore and all the rest. But we've definitely been playing catch up a little bit. Lots of challenges just adapting to remote work and dealing with the pandemic as a whole. Shadowlands itself was a monumental effort last year, but that was also finishing a project that was already well underway. Mm-hmm. Chains of Domination represents the first thing that really will have been done from inception to completion entirely from our homes. That has its own unique set of challenges that we're still working through. Thank everybody for their patience. We have an exciting slate of content planned after this, and I think we're making great progress on that. So I know I've seen some of the prognosticators and maybe even doomsayers wondering, like, is this going to be like Warlords? Is there just one tier? No, we have, there's going to be something epic and mind-blowing.
I actually think it's really funny that he brings up Warlords because, people are starting to think that, right? So in Warlords, we I think we covered it in the podcast, but essentially there was a huge content drought and we lost a ton of player base, like a ton of it, because of that drought. And people in that time started trying out their MMOs, and Final Fantasy ESO got a huge surge in players. Star Wars: The Old Republic got a huge surge in players. So Worlds Draenor was a really dark time, and there is another content drought in World of Warcraft right now, and it's pretty bad. So this is why he's trying to calm the panic in the community, because there's so many people that are like, bro, like this is so long, like they're killing the same rate over and over and over and over again. So yeah. Anyways.
Up next after this, and that's coming along great. Can't wait to talk about it more later in the year.
Okay, so that's 9.2 stuff, I would imagine.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, I will say I've been testing the 9.1 PTR every day since it came out, hoping for more and more stuff to see what's going on in 9.1. I did want to start off with Korthia because a vast array of people, including myself, a little disappointed with the world content in the base 9.0 Shadowlands, and Korthia is the new zone. The story you've done is incredible. I said this to Josh, actually, I think last week, is that the story stuff you've put into 9.1 is the best I've seen, and I'm not a story guy at all. The zone itself, though, is still really bare bones, as it's supposed to be the City of Secrets. We haven't really seen any of that yet. We've just seen a basic daily quest hub. Can you talk a little bit on what this represents? Is this just the starter, or is there a lot to come, or is this kind of what we should expect?
No, there's a lot more that's still in development that will be dropping onto PTR in the coming weeks. We want to get our PTR up as soon as we're ready to start getting useful feedback on something. And in this case, it's a lot of the story quests, some of the class changes, getting that raid testing loop spun up and working out the kinks there so we can be on track to get feedback on all the bosses. Korthia is going to have a number of other daily quests, rares, zone events, and just a general reward loop that's going to be added to it. Also, playing off the City of Secrets vibe, some of those are going to be tied into, on a narrative side, learning some of the origins of both the Maw, but also these mysterious progenitors that have been hinted at, the power behind Oribos, the power behind some of the areas that we're seeing in Korthia. And then rewards-wise, I think we're looking to something like Mana Pearls from Najdatar as an inspiration. Minus some of the RNG benthic gear that ended up being best in slot for the
there
raid.
It is. Thank you.
That's we could probably do without the endless fishing and re-rolling for specific pieces, but we want to do a lot more to give outdoor world oriented players goals to work towards and really more robust gear progression than they've had in Shadowlands at the outset. It felt like kind of covenant sets subsumed a lot of that space, and there's more that we can do there. So what you're seeing is very much a work in progress.
So they're mentioning Najdatar. So that was in BFA. Basically, run around, you do world quests. The world quests give you these pearls. You turn the pearls for gear, and you can level it up that way. This is very much for a casual type player. I don't think there's anything wrong with this, as long as the gear is not very strong. In BFA, the gear got decently strong as kind of part of a catch-up mechanic. I don't know really. I don't have much input on that other than the fact that I hope it's not too strong of gear, because that takes away from everything you earn in the game, right? So if you're gonna raid and gear through that, and then PvP and gear through that, and then you have Mythic Plus, you gear through that, and now we have in world quests to gear up to. It's like, okay, where are we supposed to gear from? All these different things, or is this simply gonna be better than that? So there's no point in doing that, and then if that's easier than this, and people are gonna flock to that. We have a min-max culture issue in the MMO community right now. So in general, this could be a good or bad thing depending on how they balance that. If you're a returning player and you just need something to get you off the ground to get moving, and this gear is that gear for you, that's not too bad of an issue. It takes away from the covenant sets they have, which are supposed to help you with we get them now by just questing through it. And then you get the covenant set, and that was supposed to be your catch-up mechanic type deal. Or at least I thought that was the intent of it. But if you add this and on top of it, now you got two different things you're doing. I'm not sure which one's going to be worth it. Probably the Pearl gear, to be honest with you. So I don't know. They're building systems. They replace systems they already have. They're trying to make world stuff relevant, I guess. And the world quests, I don't know. No one has been a fan of world quests since they created them. They basically replaced daily quests, and it's I don't really know. Honestly, right now in Shadowlands, you have daily quests and you have world quests, so it's just like you got so much to do when it comes to that, and a lot of people have skipped the world quest because right now there's really no perk to it other than cosmetics. So if you're a Mythic Raider, you're probably skipping them, and then if you're a casual player, you're probably doing them because, you're just doing them, right? So you probably care about the cosmetics, you probably care about the mounts and all that stuff, where Mythic Raiders are just getting the cool stuff from the raids or the Mythic Plus or so on and so on. So, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, this isn't really something I'm going to be like, yeah, positive. But, I don't know. I guess it could be okay. So far, that's how things are kind of going, right?
And look forward to seeing evolving core feedback in the coming weeks.
Oh, I am, absolutely. And I'm really interested in the gearing stuff. I actually didn't put this down as things for us to talk about, but one thing that's got me super excited in 9.1 is obviously we've seen the Sylvanas bow, where you're adding new abilities via weaponry, which has got me excited beyond all recognition. Is that the kind of thing we can expect, or are we expecting procs and things like that?
I mean, every time you defeat a character of the stature of Sylvanas, perhaps. I mean, I think that started out as we knew we needed to do something pretty special for Sylvanas itemization, and her bow is we actually considered, should this be a legendary? Should this be an artifact? The initial version of it, I believe, was modifying a specific ability in a way that was proving almost impossible to balance across specs, let alone covenants. And so part of the thought was like, let's just make this its own thing. And we have the ability, going back to artifacts, to give you a new button when you equip an item. It's not something we see ourselves doing routinely, but it's another fun space to explore where it makes sense with itemization.
Yeah. Hunters only then?
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry, guys. Let's talk about Legos for a bit, or legendaries, because we have this really... The actual system of creating them is kind of cool. You get to choose your own stats and things like that. Now we're going into the living, breathing Shadowlands experience. There's obviously some issues being raised now, such as when you guys do these class changes, like you've just said, stats and things change on various characters, which means with the current system, they would have to rebuild a brand new of the same exact legendary in order to accommodate changes that you guys make. Certainly if you want to have the best ones, and if it's a craftable item, people do want to have their best ones. You did mention in an interview previously about refunding and stuff like that. Have you explored a bit more on that?
We explored, but no specific plans for 9.1. The way that obtaining, the previously Mega Soul Ash, new Soul Cinders will work is that it just comes from layers 9 and up in Torghast, and that's going to be needed to upgrade your legendaries past 235. But given the way that Torghast works, of course, you're also getting the rewards from all the lower layers. So you'll still be getting significant amounts of Soul Ash. So you don't necessarily have to choose between upgrading your current legendaries or making new ones if that's the path that you want to take. We definitely recognize that this is a pain point and are working on a longer-term solution there. It's not just wanting to change the stats on your legendary potentially, but also longer-term if you crafted it for one equipment slot, but due to new gear that comes out from the new raid or elsewhere, you decide you want a different slot for your legendary. We want to make that easier to switch, but we don't know that that's going to be doable for Chains of Domination in particular, but we are working on something.
Okay. At least they're working on it.
So I kind of have something similar because we're having the Covenant-specific legendaries coming in, which I assume after what you just said, it will be just craft from fresh. Do those things change when you swap Covenants at all? Or will it be if you change from Nightfade to Venthyr, for example, you would recraft the Venthyr legendary?
You would recraft the Venthyr legendary.
Okay. Any update on when we're probably going to get two? A lot of them are designed to be paired up. Is that like a 9.2 things maybe? Because obviously when people have Covenant ones, they would probably like that as well as their class one go alongside it.
Good question.
I think that's certainly something that's on the table. Not planning on it for Chains of Domination, but it's a space we're likely to explore towards the end of the expansion.
Superb. Okay, this is the biggest sore spot I think from the raiders in the community is Conduit Energy. I mean, do I need to say anything more? What's happening with Conduit Energy, do you think?
I mean, everyone loves it. That's the feedback we've heard. So we just figure we'll proceed as we are. Yeah, I mean, the feedback we've heard is not just from raiders, also from I've heard this from hardcore arena folks, particularly people who are active players playing in multiple types of content. And I think our take on Conduit Energy right now is that it's imperfect for sure. The part of the goal of the system as a whole is to situate your soulbind layout, your conduit placement across all of your soulbinds as a bit more of a semi-rigid choice when it comes to friction. You have things that you can swap back and forth all the time, like your talents or your spec, and you have things that are immutable, like your class. These are somewhere in the middle. The thing we wanted to avoid was yet another system where the routine behavior for most players is, as you're doing your farm clear of the raid, you're switching to AoE conduits for Council of Blood, then hearthing, swapping to single target for Sludge Fist, then back to AoE cleave setup for generals, and so forth. And that just becomes an extra layer of, frankly, inconvenience, nuisance, and undermines elements of choice inherent in the system. Now, the flip side of that is, if you feel like there's only one soulbind that is viable for you for multiple specs or multiple types of content, and not just optimal, but viable, where you feel like, you know what, I'm not even going to bother queuing for Arena unless I can have this soulbind with the conduits that I need in it active. That's not something our system currently supports as well as it should. Right. Something we're looking to do over the course of PTR, and this is an area where feedback can help us a lot, is to focus on the soulbinds, the specific soulbinds that may feel mandatory for specific specs. As we're expanding the soulbind system as a whole, adding new rows, adding new traits, gives us a chance to balance the system better without nerfing the ones that are currently good, but giving compelling reasons to use the others. So if you're a druid and you can say, well, I use this soulbind for resto, this other one for balance, you're fine. You can just switch back and forth in the field. It all works. It's when you feel like everything has to go through one specific one that the system does kind of break down. We want to see what we can do over the course of this PTR cycle to improve that situation. Though other options like increasing the recharge rate of conduit energy are also on the table.
Okay. I mean, it certainly feels... I understand the goal. The goal feels very clear-cut, but the effects I'm seeing on the player base is they feel punished for enjoying various aspects of their class. Because they do like to play, high-end, or they like to swap around, and they like to do different things. And
players like to use their specs, and they like to be able to swap around. That's why dual spec became such a huge deal, and tomes and respecking the mid-raid.
Unfairly attacked for enjoying the game almost, That's the kind of bitter taste that they feel they're swallowing with systems like Conduit Energy. And is that something that you think is reasonably fixable with the current setup, or with your plans?
It's something we're trying to take into account. Like I said earlier, I think we try to draw a distinction between viable and optimal. And I know those are very subjective words that people, for some people, there is no difference. And I think those are the people with whom we're always going to have some disagreement, or there's going to be some gap between our perspectives. If you aren't willing to accept something that is 0.5% suboptimal in exchange for flexibility and branching out across multiple roles or whatever, that's almost impossible to accommodate. But when we're talking about larger gaps, where, like I said, you genuinely feel like you'd be letting your Mythic Plus group down, you'd be letting your Raid group down.
No, bro, that's what
able to perform
0.5% over a 20-player raid.
Then yeah, we agree.
That's a huge deal, right? So this is obviously for the more high-end player, but 0.5% times 20 players, that's a significant margin. So if you have, let's say, I know this doesn't affect everybody. So here's the thing. So the conduits, there's some classes that have conduits. They just use one set of conduits, one tree. There's nothing they can move around. That is just their optimal way of playing, right? Those guys aren't affected by this at all. And they're probably like, what? Why does this even a thing? Who cares, right? Then every other class that it is a thing, where they can change this conduit to get better single target, this conduit to get better cleave, this one that should get better AoE, right? Those guys are affected, and they have to go back and change it every single time they want to change content, right? So they're doing Mythic Plus, they got to change it. And they want to do Raid, they got to change it again. And then they want to do good single target, they got to change it for this. And they want to do good AoE for this fight, they got to do this. So on and so on and so on. So this is where the issue is starting to become, because the people who actually have to change the conduits are like, dude, this is nuts. I'm having to change my conduits a couple times, and then I'm out for the week, and I got to recharge them all week. And so it's just because they recharge over so much time and days. I don't know the exact number, but I know that it's super inconvenient, because once you use them all, you're stuck waiting for them to recharge, and it's taking people to actually just be able to play the game and have fun. This is a no-brainer, but fix it, get rid of it. Honestly, I would change design completely, just not have it so that When you use a tome, you should be able to swap your lines around it too. Like, there's no reason for this to be a big deal. This should be relatively easy. This is an easy one for them. Like, just change it so people can actually play and optimize how they want. This is not even a big deal. I don't know why this is. Why are they being stubborn on this? I have no idea. So confusing. This is hurting people that just want to play your game. Like, this is just not intelligent. I don't know why they would do it. But they are doing it. So I don't know what to say. Very, very unfortunate, I guess is the word to use. This is straight up a negative thing for a percentage of their player base, and they don't even care. And they say it's only a small, percentile of, sure, but when you wipe at 1%, and you think, wow, I could have got 0.5% this entire time. This could have been 1% of the boss health, or it could have been, let's just say it wasn't, right? Let's just say it was 0.25% of that 1%, right? But if everybody in the raid was more optimal, right, then that could have been the deal. So this doesn't really affect the top end, because they're going to do it. They're gonna make sure they're optimized for it. This affects kind of like the upper middle echelon of players, where they're not top world, but they are mythic raiders, and they're trying to min max so that their guild can get through it the best that they can, right? They're probably casual, can only raid a couple days a week, or maybe they're not the cream of the crop, right? Which is okay. But they're good enough to be killing mythic, right? But they're just not top, right? Nothing wrong with that, and this is affecting them more than it is the top guys. So this is just a bad, I guess, policy or a rule, or this something. They should have just changed this. I don't know why. They want to make your decisions meaningful, which I guess is what's happening, but not really. Like, it's not really. It's not meaningful. It's just painful, I guess would be the better word for it. So there's definitely times where you want to have meaningful decision making and have it really matter. And then there's times where it's like, okay, this is affecting people from having fun in the game. Let's just let them have this, right? And if some of you think, oh, well, you don't need to min-max to have fun. You're completely right. But to some people, that is fun, right? To some people, it is fun min-maxing. That's why people take tomes in the raids, and they switch their specs every single fight so they can optimize perfectly for that fight, is because for them, the fun is achieving a good parse or achieving a rank on the DPS meter, right? So maybe they're the technical weakest DPS right now, but they try their asses off, and they're like second or third place, and they're trying to push for number one, because they're like, dude, if I get number one, like, that means I'm gonna fucking badass, right? It's like, yeah, and their game should not stop them from doing that in any way, right? So yeah, this is basically the gist of it, in case you don't know. I know for me, when I heard this the first time, I was like, is that a big deal? Like, I'm trying to think, like, I'm trying to remember. And when I looked into it, I'm like, no, okay, so this is what it is. So some people don't even get affected by it, and other people are. So it's not really fair. So it's wrong on a couple levels.
And we don't want to throw up barriers that prevent people from playing the game the way they want. I think the challenge is where providing the people who, and I get it, there are plenty of people who are just sitting there being like, no, I don't mind at all. I would love to be able to optimize my character in every possible way for every encounter. Stop restricting me. It's, as we said at the outset, World of Warcraft design in a lot of ways is trying to balance competing interests and play styles, and often we end up making everybody a little bit unhappy, but hopefully there are trade-offs there, as opposed to just picking one side, saying, okay, this is the way the game is going to be played, and then everyone else has to deal with the consequences.
Yeah,
I mean, in a way, that's kind of how it is. Like, so it has to be.
Certainly for PTR testing, a lot of players, including myself, have just been copying over multiple characters to test different specs, because conduit energy just runs out, and all you want to do is try out the new things, right?
Yeah.
That's all you try, and it just feels like, it's unnecessary.
They can't even test on the servers.
There are other quality of life things
accurately because of this.
To help with some pain points, like if you're a new alt or you're switching to a new covenant. I think as you're unlocking things for the first time, we don't want that to feel like a limiting factor. So like as your renown goes up, we feel like we could be restoring your energy, for example, so that that's not a factor you're having to engage with on a regular basis. Really, the goal is simply to make, is to limit the ability to swap back and forth multiple times in a day. And at the course of trying to do different things over the course of a week, we want to accommodate that as much as possible. And that's kind of the space we're trying to navigate here.
Okay. There's certainly a log ahead on that one, I think.
For sure.
Yeah, we're never going to agree on everything. That's fine. I do want to come to Torghast then, because of course
Preach is so nice.
Torghast and stuff. But I personally am a huge supporter of Torghast. Like the premise of it is fantastic. We know from the data mining there's lots of changes you're making there. I would absolutely adore to know more about what's happening with Torghast and what you're doing, because it's the big replayable feature of the Shadowlands, right? What can we expect happening there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in this next PTR build, you should start to see a lot of those. So I mean, fundamentally, I think you say Torghast in passing. I think there's something to that, frankly. It's one of the fundamental problems with Torghast, as the team sees it, is that last fall, we made a bunch of changes because the original iteration of Torghast was so binary when it came to success or failure, that going through a full Torghast run, getting to floor 6, and finding that you couldn't kill the last boss and walking away with nothing to show for it was something that was such a viscerally frustrating experience that it was, just kind of a table flip moment for a wide range of players. And the system at the same time was also incentivizing you, like, no, you need to get your Soul Ash or you're falling behind. Keep pushing to the highest floor layer that you can do, even if you're not quite geared for it. And across a wide range of the player base, people were just having a miserable time. And that led, because failure was so punishing, what we did in December was we just nerfed the crap out of Torghast and brought things to a point where basically everyone wins. And that's what kind of a chore entails in some sense. When you set out knowing, like, okay,
Bad game design
I'm going to
right
win. I'm not really that engaged in the choices that I'm making. I'm not really focused on whether I'm playing particularly well or not. Maybe I'm trying to do it as fast as possible, but it's just a thing I need to do, and an outcome is essentially assured. That a lot was lost there. It's better than where we were previously for a bunch of players, where they couldn't do it at all, and we're just like, okay, I'm quitting the game over this. This is miserable. But we want something going forward that actually lets us make it more challenging without being as punishing. And that's the vision for Torghast going forward. So step 1 was getting rid of the death counter entirely, where, so there's no Tower Grew anymore. The Tower Grew is off in the Sanctum of Domination, soon to be defeated by a raid group full of adventurers.
What is the point of that?
Instead, to have more of a granular scoring system. When you go into a Torghast layer, when you go into layer 9, you'll see some new UI elements. You'll see that you have, long-term, a rating. There are these 5 gems or stars, whatever you want to call them, that measure your overall performance on your Torghast run. There's a meter that is measuring your activity. It's kind of like, think of like being on a hot streak in a game like Guitar Hero or whatever, where if you're moving quickly, you're killing stuff, you're getting bonuses and racking up perks as you go. You want to balance, are you avoiding death? Are you being efficient? Are you exploring the floors? And the more successful you are, the higher your overall rating for your run is going to be. You'll always get your Soul Ash at the end. But unlocking access to the next layer will require performance at a certain level. Similar to Mythic Plus there, right? If you think back and if you think to Mythic Plus and imagine like what Mythic Plus would look like if you leveled up your key, no matter how long it took you to clear the dungeon, that would have led to a place like what Torghast was at the start. Where
you're talking about the degenerate playstyles you were worried about.
Right. We're like, I mean, if you can imagine, it's like, okay, you're going to spend 2 hours slogging your way through meticulously, finishing an 18, and then, okay, time to spend 2.5 hours doing the 19. There's value in, having performance matter, but always giving people an experience that's roughly suited to their skill level. You're never going to go into a Torghast run and feel like you leave with nothing. You always have your Soul Ash. The other piece that we're adding is one of the most traditional elements of roguelike or roguelite games, which is a separate meta progression that is specific to Torghast, sort of a Torghast-specific talent tree.
Yep. Like visions for
and exactly. In 9.0 at launch, some of those things were on Venari, tied to Maw reputation and Maw gameplay, and there was a little bit of a disconnect there between your Torghast gameplay and what you were doing out in the world. Here, if you don't have the most successful Torghast run in the world, you're still going to walk away with some extra tower knowledge that you can spend.
All right, so how I see this playing out is simple. there's gonna be a good way and a bad way of doing it. This is like there's gonna be either a really fast way to do it, and everyone's gonna go to that really fast way, or you have to go take a really, really long route in order to do it, which is gonna require you to clear like everything. So it feels like a chore from what I've heard in live, and when I used to, it was kind of like a chore. In the beginning, it was fresh, it was fun, it was interesting, and we used to play it over and over again. Just, it was like whatever, but it did feel like, I don't know, at that point, I thought it was impossible to fail, really. Until later on, where it started to get a little more difficult. If you got unlucky with the kind of boss you got and you were soloing it, there were some like hard bosses or whatnot. So like there'd be one that would silence you if you were so far away, and there was stuff on the ground. It just got a point where it just got really ridiculous. So maybe that's why they nerfed it. I heard other people struggling with it. I never struggled with it, but some people did, and I think it had something to do with some of the boss compositions. I think it had something to do with some of the boss compositions. So with that being the thing, I don't know. I feel like what's going to happen is become very trivial as going forward. I think I actually liked it. There was only so many times you could die. So like you had to like think about, so in the future I thought it was going to keep getting harder, right? That's what I thought. It sounded like it was going that direction, and then they nerfed the shit out of it. So, all right. So I don't know. I don't know at all. I think that what they need to do is, I don't know. This game's starting to. I mean, Torghast. I don't know. I wasn't that big of a thing to me back in the day. It was just something to create your legendaries. You got to get the Soul Dash, and that was it. So I guess in a way you don't have to worry about that too much. You're gonna get your Soul Dash, but I don't know. I just don't know, man. I mean, at least the death thing was like, okay, I can't die too many times because then I'm gonna get owned by the big bad, right? So it made you think about things a little bit. So when it was difficult, you were kind of like, all right, I gotta be really careful about how I do this or do that. Or if you derp too many times on the traps, you know what I mean? So you had to think a little bit. There was a couple times where I think I died a couple times with the traps, you know what I mean? So having an off day. I mean, shit. Made things a little more stressful going forward after I'm like, all right, I can't fuck around no more because we died, and then this big beast can come out. That's completely gone. So you could fuck up as many times as you want. It just kind of takes away from the experience a little bit, I think. I don't know. I guess it's not that big of a deal. It's just Torghast. But I guess we could keep going.
And to unlock everything from power upgrades to convenience perks, like just being able to auto loot things around you in the tower and more to help you on your next run.
Okay. What I'm hearing there, though, is have you made it essentially a speed run? Is that what we're looking at here? Is the defining factor is racing?
No. So specifically, there are multiple ways of getting our current plan is, I'll call them gems because that's what they look like. We're still working out the exact name. Your final rating is going to be from 1 gem to 5 gems. If you get a 4 or higher, that unlocks the next layer. There's some special achievements and bonuses and stuff for 5. But you can attain a perfect 5 out of 5 score either by being thorough and clean and efficient, or by going quickly. You can choose how you want to play. So if you're exploring every level
everything
thoroughly,
or
you're
don't
doing
clear
all the
everything.
events,
Fast or
you're clearing
slow.
everything out, and you're doing it at a moderate pace, that's a perfect score. Or if you want to do more of a speed run, cool. We want to let people, play into the strengths of their spec and their own personal playstyle preferences. I know the idea of speedrun gameplay is something that's people have a very strong negative reaction to, and that's not what we want to turn Torghast into. But we also want to reward the people who want to play that way. Or, if you're a demon hunter and you want to just rush through the whole thing, cool. Let's let you and reward that.
Okay. I have a few questions off the back of that. Are we putting gear back in? Because originally in the alpha, we did have gear in Torghast. Is that something we're likely to see come back? Because I know there's experience and things perhaps coming in.
Not currently planned on like standalone gear drops. Obviously, legendaries are acquired through there, and we feel like there are plenty of gear sources already competing against each other, and we'd like to make Torghast a complement to those gear sources rather than something that competes with them directly.
Okay. I play a lot of the games that Torghast was based on, the roguelikes that you're discussing. And right now it just doesn't have the same ability variety to make the replayable experience, something you want to do rather than I'm here because I need Soul Ash, which I think is like the Endless Corridors, for example, ended up being one run that you would probably do to get a mount, which we now know is not even useful in coming to 9.1. How are we expanding that? Obviously, so much feedback. And I remember you guys sent us the email after the alpha. That I think I did something like 75,000 Torghast runs were done in total. Something ridiculous. People were enjoying the hell out of it, just because it had new abilities and how crazy it got. And you obviously pulled that back in. Are we going to re-explore that? Alternative routes, extra additional difficulty things you can engage in, anything along those lines that we do see in the normal roguelike world?
I think certainly we're looking to add more powers. There are also extra, more randomized modifiers to the runs that you'll see when you get in there. Both some negative, kind of like Keystone Affixes, sort of, but also perks that are known as blessings. So we're looking to add more variability, more variety. I think our focus in Shards of Domination, in Chains of Domination, though, was.
So what they're talking about here is there's going to be like these weird like power-ups you can get kind of in a way. So like there's one for like killing. So every time you kill a mob, you get some kind of increase, and it's like a killing spree type thing. And then obviously you hit elite, you're not going to be able to kill it in time, and then your buff will fall off, right? So this is what they're talking about. I think it's cool. I think they need to make it as fun as possible, honestly, as Torghast. And if they can get Torghast to the point where it was in the beta, where everyone was having fun playing it and trying to get fastest, and they were trying to race and see who can get the fastest time, I think people would actually maybe start playing Torghast a little bit more. The big thing is it needs to be fun, and then there should be some kind of level of difficulty. It shouldn't be crazy difficult, but it shouldn't be dying a bunch of times, So this is where I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I don't know. It's either a chore to get your Soul Ash, or it's something fun, extracurricular. I'm fucking that word up. It's an extra thing in the game for people to have fun with, right? It's one of the two, and it's been leaning towards chore, right? In the beginning, it was new, it was fresh, people were having fun with it. I had fun with it, but then it got very repetitive. Got points like, all right, I just want to get this done as quickly as I can, get my Soul Ash, and get on and start playing with my friends with whatever I want to do. That was BGs or Mythic Plus or trying to get some extra time in on raid, whatever I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do. So I was trying to get out through Torghast as quickly as possible, because it was becoming a gatekeeper to the content that I wanted to access, and I had to do it weekly. So there were a lot of times where I would do it before reset, and then the next day it would be reset, and then I'd do it again, and I wouldn't have to touch it for like almost like a week, right? So it just, I don't know. It's a little wonky here. They need to make it either really fast and easy so people can just run through it, or they need to make it so that it's actually a fun thing to do, and make it so that there is repeatability where you can keep doing stuff for rewards and fun stuff, and making it more fun with more power-ups, more variation, more different routes, achievements for doing certain things, pets, mounts, all the good stuff, right? To do that, I think it'll be fun for extracurricular activities, so people will come in and want to do it. And then if you do it the other way around, then it just needs to be quick and easy. People need to get in there, get out, because some people want PvP, some people want to do raids, some people want to do Mythic Plus, or whatever else they want to do, right? But if you make it more time consuming, it's not fun. At this point, it's a really long chore that no one wants to do. And that's where I started falling into, like, man, I don't feel like doing Torghast, but I have to do Torghast. And that's a really crappy place to be, right? So making it more fun, and making the Soul Ash being kind of like something that, yeah, you need to do it for Soul Ash, but it's actually just a fun thing to do, right? If you do that, where it's actually fun, and it's interesting, and you might, like, for example, in the beginning, I was doing it a few times, but eventually it got stale, because everything was like, oh, I know all the abilities now, and I feel like I'd done it all. So it got stale after that, right? So they need to constantly be updating and adding to Torghast in order to keep it fresh, keep it interesting. Achievements will help, pets will help, mounts will help, cosmetics will help. It needs to be something rewarding for doing it, and if they keep doing stuff like that, then people are going to continue to play Torghast just for fun and the cosmetics, and they do it for those reasons, because people are like that. But yeah, let's keep going.
Was revamping the basic scoring system and progression and then we want to build on this new foundation. We want to make sure the foundation's solid before we continue to evolve over the course of the rest of the expansion.
Okay. I did want to mention briefly that we don't really know exactly how these things work yet, but we know in the raid that there's going to be a new type of gem slot, these shards of domination gems. Some of the stuff has been data mined as being extra procs, and rightfully so, a lot of the PvP community got in contact saying, is this similar to what we saw in Uldia, where there was like raid-specific stuff, or are these going to be new damaging elements that are going to be active in Mythic Plus and PvP? And if so, do those guys have access to something similar, or is raid gear going to just be superior?
So the data mine shards of domination stuff is very work in progress. That's not a final design. I think there's a lot of, if something isn't visible on PTR, we're not talking about it. They're often discarded ideas that still remain in our data files. But we are looking at some form of unique bonuses and progression within those bonuses when it comes to Sanctum of Domination gear. We've talked about wanting to return to class sets, and we plan to do that in our next adventure after this one. But in the interim, there is something to be said for making sure that for raiders, raid gear is a bit more special for the content that they're doing as compared to Mythic Plus gear or other places. So we're looking at ways of adding bonuses to select pieces of gear that you earn from Sanctum of Domination, and leveling up those bonuses by doing the raid itself, and exclusively by doing the raid itself over the course of the tier. Now, some of these bonuses may only work in the raid. The general goal is for them to be far more effective in the raid than outside. There may be some additional power that's added, but that's not terrible in game wide. But that's not terribly different than unique, raid trinkets or procs on items or things that are slightly better. Mythic Plus has a bunch of really cool items in that space too. And with the PvP item level system for PvP, we feel confident that that the extra 13 eye levels that you get in PvP content from the Conquest gear will keep that gear the all-around best for that type of content. We're trying to get to a space where there's a wide variety of gear available at endgame, but if you are a raider, you're primarily interested in the raid gear and complement.
So, gearing, right? This has been so when Shadowlands launched, they decided to give PvP vendors a thing, which they should have been a thing for a long time, right? Because that's how it is. However, the way things are balanced right now is there's no real PvP stat. They made PvP stat a stat that's already in the game. And they said, all right, you're going to want lots of this if you're going to PvP. It reduces your damage taken and increases your damage. It's called versatility. So there probably is a couple pieces in Raid that are better and probably more optimal, right? But there's no real need to go there. You can just get it all through PvP. And now it's actually so much easier to gear through PvP that PvEers are going the PvP gear. The reason why this is all messed up, so in the very beginning of World of Warcraft, there was PvP gear and it was solid. It had really good stats. You could get it, you could earn it, and it would last you a really long time. So it made PvEers want to PvP. But the raid gear was obviously really, really good. So there was still a reason to do raids. So people who played World of Warcraft would typically raid and they would PvP. So they get the most optimal step and bang each other out, right? PvP. Some people just look cool on Orgrimmar and hung out and look cool, while others use it to kill and punish everybody else on the server, right? The decision was yours, but everyone geared up for the same reasons, and they went through the same stuff to gear up. Over the genre of time, we have different players from different eras, different games, coming in the World of Warcraft, and they want to gear up through only PvP. This is what I like to do. I just want to do this, and this is all I want to do in order to gear up. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I think if you want to have the best gear in the game and you want to really smash people, I think you should have the Mythic Raid. I think Mythic Raid should drop the end-all, be-all best gear in the game for PvP and PvP. And if you want to smash people, you should have to raid the highest level. If you want to smash people at the highest, most optimal, just like with raiding, you want to get the best gear so you can do the most damage. If you're a PvPer that wants to have the best gear, which technically it's not needed, right? PvP is all about skill. So if you really are better than the other player, the amount of increase you're going to get from the Mythic Raid gear is going to be just a little bit better. So it's not going to cause you to get out of control, right? So you still run into a PvP as a gladiator level, and if you're not a gladiator, he's still gonna poop on you, But it should give you an edge, right? So if you run into a mythic raider out in the world, it's not like, oh, dude has no versatility gear, I'm gonna poop on this dude real quick, right? That's really annoying. From somebody who likes doing both content, I like PvPing and I like PvEing. I hated in Cataclysm when I had to switch to resilience gear, because what happened, I'd be out farming and then someone would catch me out of my gear, and then I had to run around and try and get out of combat so I could get my gear on to even stand a chance. And versatility does get to that point. It's just really annoying. Like, they should balance the game either so there's no PvP stat and then you have to fight each other, or if they're gonna have a PvP stat, they should just have a legit PvP stat. Bring back resilience and let them do their thing. It's gonna suck in the world though, which is where I think the best PvP is, and it takes away from mythic raiding. Now there's no reason for PvPers to raid, which I think they should have to raid. Raiding's the pinnacle of World of Warcraft, not PvP, right? PvP is just another aspect, another avenue of content to go and do. But the bulk of the game is centered around raiding, and always has been. And I don't know why we would change that going forward. And they did, which is where we have all the new generation that doesn't understand why you should have to raid to PvP and be good at PvP. They don't understand. It's crazy. And to think that where this game started in the pinnacle of the pinnacle expansions where people did both, people are starting to the point where they don't want to do both, which is crazy. It's crazy to me. It's crazy. Like, raids are so cool. Well, they used to be, right? And PvP was fun, and everyone used to do it. A lot of people did it. So I don't know. It's interesting. But gearing is a hot topic for this expansion. I think hot topic going forward. I'm glad to see class sets coming back. I don't like having to level something up through the raid. I don't like having to have things only work in the raid. I don't like things only working in Mythic Plus. It's so weird. Like, I'm fine with them working on making changes, trying to experiment. But some of this stuff, I'm like, I just don't get it. I don't get it. Like, if there's a cool set bonus, that intrigues you to want to go get that set bonus. Now, if you take it off as soon as you walk outside the raid, damn. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, well, like, you took away the whole perk of getting the bonus, and I can't use it outside of raid, and I can't use it in done. It's just like, man, like, what are you doing? Like, just if you can make a cool set bonus, make a cool set bonus. Make me want to complete that set bonus so I can get it. Leveling up, I'm open to play with that, because maybe you can make it cooler, right? By leveling up through raid clears or whatever the case may be, killing a certain boss will empower it, and you get stronger and stronger. The guy who's been raiding since the start versus the guy who just came midway, maybe he's not as strong, right? But even then, like, is that really fair? Is it his fault? I don't like that, right? Like, just let it be baseline and be what it is. I don't know. Interesting stuff.
Complementing it with other sources. If you're a PvPer, you're primarily interested in the PvP gear, and complementing it with a couple of other sources. And that's kind of how you're proceeding.
Okay. I can't avoid this now. What do you mean by class sets exactly?
I mean, good old. Hey, it's a raid zone. There's a rogue set. There's a warrior set. There's a mage set. Thematic.
Do they carry any bonuses?
I mean, that's presumably part of sets.
I mean,
I think
that's what I heard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I'll take that. I want to move on to some bigger topics with you while I've got you.
Sure.
So the last time we spoke, we had some big conversations, and obviously your time is limited. But now we've seen the metrics on how the Covenant's played out. Are you surprised by how players made their choice versus what you hoped would happen? And just what is the internal feeling now if you're going to go further in this direction with people making these kinds of choices? Or have you changed your mind based on what the player base actually did?
I mean, really, our goal was for everyone to be a Night Fae, so we think that things are proceeding wonderfully, and eventually we'll achieve our goal of fairy dominance by the end of the expansion.
Well, the Warlords are there. 98% of them are Night Fae.
Jesus. There's ongoing balance there, and 9-1 is also a chance to do some of that. Overall, though, I would say we're really happy with the Covenant system as an expression of Shadowlands, as an expression of the identity of Shadowlands, these 4 distinct realms, narrative paths, and as much headache as it's caused, I know, to portions of the high-end community, we've heard a wide range of feedback, very positive feedback about the feeling, the choice, about the feeling of identification with the Covenant, particularly across alts. It's something that largely, if I could go back in time a year, we would proceed down the same path. Now, that's in no way to say that, okay, this is a thing we're going to do in every expansion going forward. I don't think so. I think this type of 4-way choice, the central element of this expansion is something that is of Shadowlands. I think what we will be looking to carry forward, as always, are things like branching narrative paths, the feeling like you can have your own personalized experience as distinct from some of the other players in the game, and ability choosing among different abilities, things like that, but in a different form, and certainly not the way Covenants were presented in particular.
Okay, and how do you feel, like, especially with 9.1 story, which we've played through, it seems very much at odds with the Covenant system as a whole. How are you guys sort of dealing with that internally? Is it just kind of a gloss over? I mean, we're all working so closely together now that I don't want to belabor the point, but it doesn't seem to fit into the game at all at this point.
Well, I mean, I think they're still different. They're different groups with different leaders and philosophies. They're working together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Covenants were never set up as enemies. The Covenants, I mean, other than the faction of the Necrolords who weren't really who you were joining, and so we're cooperating throughout. And there are still specific elements of the story that a Kyrian player will experience as they go through the chapters that occur in Bastion and otherwise. But this is these 4 paths converging as we take the fight to the jailer. But the people's identity and where they're coming from, where they're drawing their power from, who their closest allies are, those things still stand, and that is consistent with the system as we see it.
Fair enough. I did want to talk about systems of borrowed power. This is kind of a broader subject. It was kind of a recent thing. We brought in Legion. And now at this point, systems and the idea of most of the class growth being borrowed power has become kind of a WoW staple in the last couple of expansions. It definitely feels that this is anecdotal from me, obviously. It's worn a bit thin because we see a lot of things being taken away from us.
So I just want to go over it. So he just mentioned the last topic with covenants. So everybody is going to the same covenants for their class. So like if you're a fire mage, you go to this covenant. If you're a warlock, you're going to this covenant. If you're this, going to this covenant. That is so much in the game. Like we're talking like 98, 99% of players are picking covenants based on what's good for their class. What is there to say about that, right? We knew that was going to happen. We knew it, right? The only way they could have made this truly special and fantasy-like and pick which one aligns with you better is if they actually reduced the power or took out the power between each one. So you picked one based on what your personality was like. That in cosmetics you were after, it would have been completely different, right? Because they didn't do that, and there's power involved, everyone's gonna go to whatever's best. That's where they messed up with that design. You can't create something with power involved and expect people to pick like an RPG. It's not gonna happen. People are going to go where the power is at. They want to be as strong as they possibly can. There's no reason why they wouldn't. So, what do we learn from this? If you want people to pick a specific thing according to their personality or what they're interested in, you can't have player power involved at all, right? So they truly were after that. They wanted druid type people or healer type people, spiritual, tree hugging people to go to the Night Fae. They shouldn't have put power involved because then people would. And then the wicked people would go to become a vampire type thing. Everyone would go to the certain covenant. If you want to be a warrior type thing, they would go to this covenant. But instead, we got, which one's better for my class? Okay, I'm going that one. Like, that's really it. So, yeah. Just wanted to cover that real quick so you guys aren't, confused.
Like we saw with Legion to BFA. Then it returns in some slightly altered form. So we know a lot of the legendaries in the game are just tier set bonuses that we used to have, or they're modified versions of Legion legendaries. And we seem to be going around in this circle of, here's some new stuff, we're going to take it away. Later on, we're going to give it you back. And how do you guys see this long term? Are we going to see next expansion, the Convoke the Spirits Legendary, for example.
Probably.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly, as we saw with the Legion artifacts, there are some things that end up feeling so iconic and so successful that people want to keep them in some form, and we generally find ways to make that happen. On the topic broadly, we agree. This is something we talk about a ton internally when we look at our systems design and the direction we want to take for following expansions. I think looking back to how we ended up here in the first place was, honestly, I would say about 10 years ago. The development team came to the realization that permanent, evergreen, layered expansion of systems, character complexity, abilities just wasn't infinitely sustainable. That if you're giving people 3 new abilities every expansion, if you're adding new professions, you're adding permanent enhancements, at some point the system kind of collapses upon itself. There's homogenization, there is just general ability bloat and complexity that is where things are being added because something has to be added, not because the game needs it. And so that led to us pulling significantly back from that, really from Mists onwards. And what we saw on Warlords was the feeling of like, well, there's kind of nothing. Like, there were Draenor perks that you got while leveling up, but I don't think those were tremendously exciting. And players didn't feel like
Wolf? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. And there just felt like a significant gap there. And so the idea was, okay, well, if we're not comfortable with permanent, expansions and additions to players' characters, what if we do temporary ones? What if we pull out all the stops? And I think the Legion system was probably the most successful of all of these for a couple of reasons. It was certainly very fantasy forward, but also, frankly, it was new.
Yeah,
people hadn't people hadn't understood where it was headed. People didn't get their Ashbringer and think to themselves, well, wait, what's going to happen 3 years from now? How are they going to fix this? How are they going to move on from this? It was just, no, I'm getting all these cool powers. I am getting stronger, doing awesome things with my weapon, doing awesome things with my class hall. And then we saw at the end of Legion when we had to burn out your artifact because it was literally more than doubling your power and adding a dozen different effects to your character that were not sustainable going forward to people who hadn't even played that expansion. That felt pretty crappy. And so I think
that's an
looking forward, we want to find a middle ground. I think we want to look. We're discussing ways of getting back to how we can still have that core RPG element of permanent advancement of your character. Of, I'm a mage, and I went to the Shadowlands and I overcame these foes and I learned things and I came back as a better mage. Not, I had this thing while I was there that I left behind that I never get to use again. And we'll have more to talk about how those philosophies express themselves, in the year to come. I think this is not a mid-expansion pivot, but we agree with a lot of the community feedback about the risk of borrowed power just feeling like just a treadmill where you want growth, you want forward movement, you don't want to get something then lose it, then get something new that replaces it, then lose it, and we want to find a way out of that trap.
Well, it feels like you're going in the opposite direction now, right? Because you're now bloated with borrowed power things. In the other, in the same vein as like making all the legendaries, is there's so much stuff now of the 3 expansions that
get them Breach,
get them away. Is that now there's a huge array of things, and there's certainly the problem we had coming into BFA when you started saying, okay, we'll put some of these into the talent trees. Is that but we had both of those originally, so it was a much better combo. I want to talk about the fear you guys expressed, and I remember the discussion that you brought up earlier is that we can't just keep adding new talent rows endlessly. It's just not going to work. And you said you were fearful of how that would look. Would it be a blade storm that fills a raid by the end of it? Things like that. Are you still having that fear, or is that something you're willing to relax on in order to add in these features long term?
I think we have. I think the answer is both. We absolutely have that fear, but we have to be willing to relax it a little bit and engage with that fear to some extent. I think the concern.
Right, let's get into this. Okay. A little bit of a history lesson here with Warcraft. So the old meta way back in the days, every expansion we got something new. We always got something new. New talent row, new talent, new abilities, something, right? And by around level 90, Cataclysm, it got to the point where shit was just out of control. Mages had everything. They can go invisible, they could slow you, they could sheep you, they could snare you. You know, they had everything overpowered. They had blink, they have immunities. Mages were out of control, right? But it was still, and then paladins as well. Like there were certain classes that just, they had so much, they were just getting out of control, right? And the power was in these few classes that just had all kinds of skills, right? And there were plenty of people who just didn't use all your skills. But if you use every skill at your disposal, some classes were just super bonkers, right? They went from that to borrowed power, which I guess borrowed power has always been in the game, but like, I mean, to strictly like, so we got the artifact weapons in Legion. That was probably the biggest one. I'd say I didn't have a problem with the artifact weapon. You had to grow it over time. Very grindy. There's a lot of issues with Legion. But the artifact weapons were not a problem. They were very, very cool. They were very specific items throughout World of Warcraft's history, so they're very cool items. So nobody felt like, oh, I'm getting something lame. Like everybody got something cool. So the fantasy was there. The attachment to the item, though, the worth of the item was huge. You wanted to have that epic, legendary artifact, right? They're just badass. So for paladins, we got Ashbringer, and we got a hammer from Uther's hammer. So like we have all these cool items, and we powered them up, and then so yeah, I guess in the future we didn't think about it, right? We obviously had to let go of that. But then BFA, we just continued re-adding in things we had from Legion. Even Shadowlands, we're adding things in we had from Legion. So it's just like everything's being recycled, right? So I had a lot of debates with certain topics of different random people, but the reality is like a lot of the stuff we get in World of Warcraft is recycled from previous expansions. So if you've been playing from vanilla onward, you're like, oh, we had this back in blah blah blah, we had this back in this blah blah blah. So I typically know how things work before having to actually play with it, because they usually work very similar. It just gives you an advantage of being like a World of Warcraft veteran, I guess. But it's just kind of sad because like it's very rare we get something very unique or new. And in Legion, I feel like we got quite a few things. But then since then, we're recycling all those cool ideas. We're bringing old ideas back, basically. So it's a problem, right? So instead of just recycling all the hard work of Legion over and over again for the next 2-3 expansions, they need to put in the work and create something brand new, right? And I don't know if they should go with the whole borrowed power system, really. But it's hard, right? Because, like, what do they give us every expansion? What's the new big thing, right? Could be classes, but then everyone's going to flock to those classes, like with Death Knights and Demon Hunters. What do they do? And this is the true question, right? And I don't think anyone really has a good answer for it, but this is literally the biggest thing for the development team is they need to be thinking about these things going forward. They should probably have 20 different things they're probably working on, right? And then 1 or 2 of those things will be really, really solid and they can use it. But I can tell you this, they can definitely add more classes to the game. The game needs more range classes. So that could be one of them right there. This expansion, we're introducing a new range class. I don't think they need to add abilities or borrow power every single expansion. I think they can take one off and then make a new class, right? Or take one off and create a new spec, or remake a spec, or remake a couple specs, or there's things they can do to keep the game interesting. I think the other thing is like over time they've changed some of these specs over and over again. So like I guess it's making sure that the specs all meet kind of like the class fantasy of their spec, and make sure that they're all solid, make sure that they're balanced. Class balance would be a good big change. World of Warcraft has almost never been balanced. The only thing that's kept it kind of fun is that no one kind of knew what was strong, what wasn't strong. And in the past, like looking back on it, we realized, oh yeah, Warlocks are strong that expansion, or this is strong this expansion. But Classic is the first time we're going back and actually like playing these things, knowing that. But for the most part, when you go to an expansion, you're not sure what's going to be strong until the logs come out, and it takes a couple of weeks of logs because people are figuring stuff out still. So I think just redoing specs, trying to create some real class balance would be enough for me. You don't even have to give me anything else. Rework the classes, make them actually balanced. Maybe a rock, paper, scissors, or legitimate balance across the board. So that any class can beat any class, or close enough where one class can beat most classes if they play well, this class can beat most classes. Like, they should all be able to kill each other, or at least rock, paper, scissors, where this class beats this class beats that class, right? So you can kind of figure it all out. I think that would be a bigger reward than power balance, right? Then we'd have more fun playing the game. And then if all the DPS on the chart were really, really close to where it's like there was no clear defining, like almost every patch, there's one or two classes that are just pretty far ahead of everybody else. Now, in raids, typically you can play whatever you want, but if they could actually legitimately make every class very, very close within 1% of each other, I'd say even 0.5% of each other, depending on what the kind of numbers you're pushing. Now, pushing millions, then it needs to be a smaller percentage, right? Now, if you're pushing hundreds, then obviously the percentage could be a little bit higher. But if they can get that balanced perfectly, I think people will have a lot more fun and do that. But anyways, I don't want to go too far into changes and whatnot, but I think that'd be a good place to go for each expansion and what they bring.
Speak to this firsthand. A dozen years ago, I was a class designer working on classes and trying to come up with, along with doing counter design, trying to come up with, okay, what are the new Death Knight abilities going into Cataclysm? What are the new Rogue abilities going into Cataclysm? And a lot of the time, you had well-rounded classes that didn't have clear things they needed, but just there's an obligation that, okay, we're adding 5 new levels, 10 new levels. We need to give them 3 or 4 new abilities. And those are not necessarily the best design things. You end up with, okay, it's an extra cooldown. That's easy. Everyone's going to like it.
Are you responsible for Dark Sim?
Perhaps. That's what a rare case where
great ability.
A rare case, because when working as both a class designer and encounter designer, I could write a check for my other self to cash, because that was a huge burden on encounter design. But
yeah,
hey, if I can sign up for it, no problem.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, and I think the risk is when we're adding stuff because we need to add stuff, rather than we're adding stuff because we have a cool idea, because it's going to make the class, it's going to make the experience more fun. It's going to give them some new way of engaging with group content or whatever else. And so that's the trap we want to avoid. But I don't think the answer is, let's do none of it. Let's give you no permanent additions to your character and have everything be temporary. I think we need to find a middle ground where, and we've always had borrowed power in some form. I mean, we talked about set bonuses earlier. The gear and sets were like the original form of that, right? You have these extra things that modify your rotation, that modify the way your character plays. Then you leave them behind and you move on to the next tier and you get something new. And it's all about finding a balance.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've gone very heavily in the other direction now, right? With several systems all doing those things. But it's definitely something that we see more and more, is like a recycling, which obviously feels bad from both sides. I'm sure you guys would like to be a bit more creative as well with the stuff that you get to put out.
They're lazy, Preach. They're lazy. They'd rather just recycle.
Absolutely, yes. And
looking, I'm joking.
We'll have a lot more to share beyond Shadowlands. I think, though, getting back to it, I think we're happy with the Shadowlands ecosystem, the range of how those things interact with each other, the choices players have to make, the depth to the characters. We just want to find a way to carry that forward in a more permanent way, and not have to come up with a brand new system that people will go into in our next expansion already beginning to ask and knowing that it's going to be temporary and that they're going to have to leave it behind.
Okay. When reviewing, like I say, we had over 1,000 questions come in for this, and a big chunk of that was about item levels and power gains and things like that. So I do want to address with you is that the power inflation currently in the Shadowlands is pretty extreme in a very tiny band of item levels. So what we've ended up with is a kind of strange situation where people are reaching, say, 200 item level. A Mythic Raider is just 20 item levels ahead, yet they're doing multiple times more damage, which is doing two things. It's making people feel that this item level 200 gear that they're getting is absolute trash, worst thing ever. And at the same time, we're seeing these raiders who are just, and PvPers as well, who are just skyrocketing, and makes a lot of players feel like they just have no chance even though I'm so close, numerically, I'm 10 item levels behind or whatever. But the inflation this time around per item level has just gone nuts. Is that going to be something that's addressed, or is this going to be something that by the end of the Shadowlands is just going to be extreme?
Actually, so I'm actually interested by the premise of the question, and I disagree a little bit with that. And I think if players are looking at Mythic Raiders doing, multiple times their damage, frankly, that's a skill issue, right? That there, as you yourself very well know, there are vast skill gaps there when it comes to performance. The power budget for our gear hasn't changed in years. One item level is roughly 1%. That's what it was back in Wrath of the Lich King. And Wrath of the Lich King, I don't know, heroic Ice Crown gear was 13 item levels higher than normal Ice Crown gear. If anything, I would say the rate of inflation has shrunk slightly. We used to have 15 item level tiers last expansion. We're down to 13 this time. And while there is some additional complementary power increase through things like legendaries, conduits, unlocking extra soulbind traits, total power budget of those is smaller than certainly corruption, but even before corruption, like essences plus Azerite or your artifact weapon.
Okay.
So yeah, like if you look at someone's stats, if you look at the gear.
Okay, so I actually looked this up. I wish I remembered that he said Wrath of the Lich King, so I went back to Legion and I looked at the last raid tier combined with what we're doing now. It is pretty close. I'm just surprised he said it was a skill issue. Like, damn. So here's the thing. This has always been a thing. It is inflation of power for sure. So when you gear up and you have the best gear in the game and you're min-maxing and you have everything optimized, even that 0.5% not Azerite trait, but Soul Essence, right? All those things add up. And when you're doing every little thing to the T and someone is cutting corners around every corner, the difference is going to be massive, right? It is not abnormal to have a Mythic Raider full decked out doing double to triple the damage of someone who has no idea, or they're doing okay, right? And they're doing okay things. They're not enchanting their gear. They're not gemming their gear. They're messing up in their rotation slightly. They are taking in unoptimal things going on there. It's 100%. They have a lower item level by a significant margin. They are going to do way less damage, period. If you min-max the most and you just have nothing but, say, the same player and you have two different item levels, the difference will still be pretty significant. Will it be as significant as the other player? No, but it will be significant. The reason why? Because when you have all those item levels, just the base strength or intellect or agility is going to give you a pretty significant margin. Not to mention there's a lot of like crit soft caps, all these soft caps and secondary stats. They continuously try to simplify the game by taking those out or try and minimize them. I don't know why. It takes away from the game. But anyways, those things can also play an effect too, especially depending on what class you're playing. They make a big deal. A very, very big deal. It can completely change how you enchant and how you gem, right? And any Mythic Raider knows that. So what Ian's saying here is not 100% wrong. Now, I think Preach is kind of like, wait a minute. The reason why I think Preach is going to say this is because, so if you don't know, Preach is a Mythic Raider. He is also in a top guild. So he probably has a bunch of alts. And I mean a bunch of alts. That's what those top players do. They're crazy. Obviously, I've never been able to do that. I have a job. I have other things I have to do. But I've in the past, I have had 3 to 4 alts. That in my most hardcore, right? 3 to 4. And I definitely understand where he's going with this. But I do think Ian is actually a little bit right on this. Just because I went back and looked at some blogs. I didn't go back to Wrath. I went to Legion specifically because that's where I'm the most educated. I play Legion really hardcore. And not really hardcore. Like casually hardcore. But I was in a pretty top-ranked guild. I had some really, really high world parses. So I know Legion. So I went to Legion to check this out. And it did seem it's in the ballpark for sure. BFA, I have no way to really, with corruption, it's just out of control. I don't know. But yeah, I'm actually interested to go back to Wrath and look at that. I'm not sure if we have logs from Wrath. I don't think we do. I don't know. It's a really long time ago. But I know people want to jump all over him probably because he made that comment, and he, as a game developer, I don't know if he should have said that, but I don't think he's wrong. I think there is a little bit of a skill issue there, right? And I don't even think it's an issue. It's not an issue. Let's put it that way. Not everyone's a hardcore, and I don't think everyone needs to follow the what the top Mythic Raider is doing to the T, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect them that much. But if you do get a scenario where a Mythic Raider and a not so optimized person are in the same group, yeah, it's not going to add up very well at all, right? Now, if it's the same player behind the keyboard, you might see significant differences just because of the stats. But this shouldn't be something that he should be surprised about as a Mythic Raider, and they should understand 100%, because you should know how every stat and percentage of stat affects your character to the T. At least that's how I was when I played casually hardcore. I knew every little detail of everything, right? And so I'm pretty sure they should know that. So I'm a little surprised with it, but maybe this is a community question. Maybe the community is pushing for this. I'm not quite sure. Let's go ahead and get it back on there.
226 chest piece should have 26 to 30% more stamina and primary stat than a high level 200 chest piece. And that should be consistent across the rest of the gear.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's what we're seeing happen even with skilled players going from, say, heroic to mythic. It's certainly, I mean, it could be, again, it's a gut feeling looking at it and looking at the numbers. And there may be skill issues there with people playing alts or whatever. But it certainly feels when we're clearing raids that the item level bonus we're getting now is very extreme in terms of the actual output that comes along with it. I've certainly seen, just with those 20 levels, it's same player, same class, nowhere near the potential there, which is expected, obviously, going from, say, normal mode to mythic, but larger than we would normally see. But I will refer to your wisdom on that one for sure.
I mean, I'm interested to dig into it myself too, but I mean, I think that's certainly the intent, and I believe that this. I mean, I'm not looking at the stats right in front of me as I say that, but I believe that is accurate. That amount of gear progression is generally healthy. Like, I think certainly for people who are coming in as alts who just want to get immediately caught up, they don't want to feel far behind their mains, there's a natural desire to want to bridge that gap as quickly as possible. But as you acquire gear over the course of a tier, that's that same feeling that makes it so that, a boss where you once struggled to meet the enrage timer is something that you confidently steamroll coming back, a month or so later as you moved on to the next challenge.
True.
And it lets us not have to make quite as many nerfs or make heavy-handed nerfs to allow a wider range of skilled groups to progress through the content over the course of tier.
Okay. I want to transition that slightly then and talk about that 200 iron level to the alt character experience, because obviously during the announcement, it was the alt-friendly expansion. Now again, a little anecdotal, but it's certainly a view that's shared by many, from what I can tell, is there's this weird process of getting a character ready at cap, getting everything in place, repeating the campaign you've already done, is certainly if you're playing the same Covenant again, recollecting conduits, legendary recipes, starting to go into Torghast again. And it mounts up into quite a daunting hill to climb over before you feel a character is quote-unquote ready, because you can jump into stuff, but you'll be missing certain elements. And I know for me, it's been off-putting. I've just capped 12 characters, and I was looking which one I want to do, and just the prospect of doing that without some, especially renown, is to the point where I didn't want to play them. I wonder if that's something shared with you guys about these sort of check boxes you have to deal with fresh characters, or if you're quite happy with how the catch-up system is working right
now. Mixed feelings, I would say. I think we're happy with how the catch-up for something like Renown is working, both for new players and alts. I think, you can switch Covenants, you can have a new 60 and just play normally and very rapidly go through the tiers that, obviously took people months to traverse initially. Depending on which ones you're going for, some legendary recipes. Obviously, it doesn't help if you have different classes, but the legendary recipes are account-wide. I think so. There are areas where we can improve for sure. I think when playing alts, part of the thinking was it's certainly a good excuse for many people to try out a different Covenant. If you're playing through a different Covenant's campaign, it's a much fresher experience. If you're replaying the same full campaign that you've already done, that's understandably not something that a lot of people are going to be excited to do multiple times. Torghast and Soul Ash acquisition as well are something that does not scale as well as it should in terms of multiplying across multiple characters. The thing we want to be wary of at the same time is this always gets back to the dilemma of trying to please different audiences with conflicting goals. I think certainly you and many of the folks listening to this right now probably see alt gearing, alt progression as a means to an end where the end is what they want. They want to queue high-rated arena with their friends. They want to push high keys, and they want to level up a different healer or a different tank to run keys with their friends. They just want to get there as quickly as possible so they can do the end activity. There are tons and tons of other folks who play alts because they've stalled on their progression on their main, and they want goals to work towards, and they want to get their item level up. They want to earn new powers, earn new things. Then when they get to that similar point where they have to go into more organized content to continue progressing, they switch to a new character. And so if we're completely shortcutting that and removing the progression for alts at an account-wide level, we're actually potentially destroying a fairly significant playstyle for a different group of folks. And again, I know that a lot of people are probably listening to this and being like, he's out of touch and crazy. No one enjoys that. I promise you there are plenty of people who are all about the journey.
All right. So Ian is right, and I'm actually in the similar boat as Preach, where I don't have a lot of time to play, right? So I have to be specific, right? So I played a Disc Priest, and I decided I really wanted to play Holy Paladin again. I wanted to play both, really, right? That's what I wanted to do. But I realized it was just too much work is what it felt like, and there's so many things I was like, I don't want to have to do that again, right? That was my biggest thing. I don't want to do that again. I ended up just quitting the game because I didn't feel like doing that. I didn't feel like redoing everything that I had just done. And I quit the game. So, I don't know. I see both sides of it. I really do. Because Ian is correct. There's a lot of people who like the experience of leveling up and doing this and experiencing everything, and they're all about the story. And there's some people like me who just wanted to get into the end game, and they catered to that a lot in the past, and it's really hurt the game. Like, we don't want them to just shortcut to the end of the game, right? Like, we have games like ESO and Star Wars: The Old Republic where the leveling process is so much of the game. It's an adventure, right? And World of Warcraft Classic was the same way too, right? Where you had to level up was such a huge monumental task. So making alts was not something you quite wanted to do right away, but people end up doing it, right? But it takes you some time to build up to that. It's just hard because it's like 10 levels, so it's such a small amount of time, but it's like there's so much going on. It's just like there's so many things that I'm kind of like so maybe there's some things they can make where you can just kind of skip through. I think this is also linked to all the bard power, right? So back in Kata, I used to be able to have 4 or 5 alts. The only thing I had to worry about was getting the max level, and from there it was just killing dungeons and getting loot, and that's all I had to worry about. I had to worry about reputations too much. There were obviously things that if you got reputation up, it would help you make you a little bit stronger, but you didn't necessarily need them. So for an alt, you can kind of skip out a lot of those things, right? So, and there's also Dead Plunger, because once you got exalted, then your main didn't need anymore. So you spent that time doing it on your alt, and so on and so on and so on, right? But between all the borrowed power, it's kind of hard, because now you're in this situation where you're doing all of this, you gotta do that, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do, just in order to get your character up to par. This is that max level. So this is where all the complications of borrowed power is starting to inflate into a lot of chores and things you have to do in order to become as powerful as you want to be. So my honest suggestion is get rid of the chores, and I think all this will just follow through. Make end game just gear again, and that should resolve it. No more powers, covenants, artifact weapons, even. Just go back to being Mythic Plus. Get some gear. Raids, you get some more gear, and in high-end Mythic content, you get the best gear, right? And then raid and PvP, they can do their arenas, they can get their conquest, they can buy gear, and then they can fight in the arena, right? They can do that. Make it simple. Simple systems. And yes, people are gonna rush through it, have all the gear, and be done. But then they're gonna make alts, and they're gonna do the same thing, or they're gonna continue to try and get new bests or whatever the case may be. I miss being able to raid on multiple characters because we were a high-end guild. We could clear the content in one day, and then the next day we do it again on another character. I also miss being able to just re-roll relatively easily by just leveling up and then getting geared. That's all it required. With all these other systems in place, it's so hard to re-roll. It's so hard to do it because there's so many things you have to do. It's too much work, you know. And this is in-depth stuff that you wanted, and sometimes it's really cool. Like Legion, it was really, really cool. It doesn't always need to be like Legion. I wouldn't mind having Kata, Wrath of the Lich King type gearing system back, badges, and keeping it simple. We don't have to have these crazy in-depth systems every expansion. So I don't know. That's just me.
And if we just said, no, there's no journey anymore, you just skip to the end, that would do them a significant disservice. And so that's what we're trying to juggle here.
Yeah, I mean, I know in terms of skips, the ones that I need to specifically mention because it was asked a million times. More skip for the start. Obviously replaying the intro.
Mm-hmm.
And as you just said, if it's an option to skip the Covenant campaign if you've already done it to get the soul mines unlocked. Those are the kind of they're not long either. I don't want to come across as this is a massive inconvenience. It's really not. It's just very tedious and very uninteresting to replay that story because the stories are very good, but doing it again and again, that's the problem.
I agree. That's something that I'll definitely take back to the team to discuss. I mean, it's the same way we have the Threads of Fate mode that lets you open-endedly, get from 50 to 60 rather than playing through the exact same linear content again. We know that, narrative content is a centerpiece of the game, but playing through the exact same piece of narrative content multiple times is something we want to avoid forcing you to do. It should be an option if you want to, but not something you have to.
Okay. I want to move on to some nerdy questions now, but it's become more widespread, of course, with the MDI being available and all the things people are seeing there. Congratulations to Echo, by the way. And healer DPS, because this has been going on for a few years now, is the discrepancy has become so large that genuinely, if you bring those high DPS healers, your raid is just so significantly easier because it's like you're bringing extra DPS characters as well. It's like you're playing with more than 20 men, what is the situation internally with that? In terms of, I mean, more to the point, there's I know several people who've quit because they're like Resto Druids because they're just not able, they just feel like a waste of time compared to these other characters.
Yeah, this is definitely something that we're discussing. Solutions can be easier said than done without, gutting specs or existing playstyles in the middle of a tier or in the middle of an expansion. But I think both Holy Paladin and Disc Priest are obviously discussed a lot, and the big factor is healer. It's not just healer DPS; it's free healer DPS. Effectively, I think being able to trade off between damage done and throughput is interesting. We obviously want people to be able to solo as healers, do things like Torghast as healers if they want, and in situations where there isn't significant HPS needed, doing damage is a way that you contribute, and that's a mark of a skilled player. I think the tricky part is when your optimal healing throughput also gives you a bunch of damage. Disc was designed around that, and the trick there on our end is, and we've been more or less successful at this at times, often less successful, dialing in Disc throughput so that they are useful, often invaluable, but not all around the best without weaknesses. When they are topping healing meters and also contributing the damage they do, that's a big problem. Things like reining in Spirit Shell and the rest of their kit is trying to move a little bit in that direction, both in 905 and 9.1, where a Holy Priest should give more overall throughput consistently. But when you bring a Disc Priest, well, their absorbs can be truly irreplaceable if they let you survive mechanics that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. And then, of course, their damage is their damage, while still giving them enough throughput to be able to manage a dungeon or other content if they need to. Holy Paladin is a bit of a different case, where I think they are a larger problem. Some of that is, some of it's Ashen Verdict stuff, but I think it's also that one of many playstyle that is one of many has become kind of the default and the highest throughput playstyle. Having the option to spend the fight in melee range, spending a third of your GCDs on like Crusader Strike and Judgment. That should be an option for a Holy Paladin. But the fact that it's the best way to play a Holy Paladin, I think is not ideal. And if you had to trade off healing throughput to do that damage, that would be a better space for the spec as a whole. And again, none of this is about, making Holy bad or nerfing them as healers. It's having them make more of the same choices that other healers have to make when it comes to damage or healing, not just free damage as I'm healing.
So if you guys don't know, I mained Holy Paladin and Legion, and I had a blast. This sounds like he's listened to some of my videos. Like, I was complaining about them sticking and pushing players into the DPS shotgun build instead of giving us the option to do whatever you want to do, because a lot of healers don't care about damage and they'll sit back and they'll cast and they'll do what they want to do. Paladins have always brought free damage with Crusader Strike, Judgment, and Consecration, right? They've always had those abilities and they've been able to drop them and use them when needed. So on Crosis and Nighthold, I did a lot of damage and I healed an insane amount, right? But it wasn't easy, and that it was a rarity in order to actually do that kind of gameplay. But when they pushed everyone into Shockedin and giving the wings, affecting it almost like the PvP talent where you did damage and it healed, that didn't it just kind of ruined it. First of all, you're making everyone play one style as having all these different ways to heal as a Holy Paladin. You can go full caster, you can go melee healer. They had so many different ways you could play Holy Paladin, and that's what made it fun to me, because depending on what the raid needed, I could adjust. They've done a lot with Holy Paladin. Now, I'll be honest, now, because Disc Priest and Holy Paladin do so much damage, because they're literally going shotgun builds, yeah, it's becoming a problem, right? And then at this point you bring a bunch of Paladins and a bunch of Disc Priests and you don't have to worry about the mechanics. You'll have enough healing throughput with Spirit Shell combined with a Holy Paladin's burst healing. You could probably do that and bring enough damage to almost add a whole other DPS to your group, which makes DPS checks much easier to reach. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by this at all. Not only did you make healing on a Paladin more, limited. You have one playstyle essentially. You've also created a meta of damage dealing healers, which now has degraded Resto Druids, unfortunately, which is strange because at one point in time they were known for doing a crazy amount of damage. You degraded them, and then Holy Priest has never been good at damage. Now, I played with it a little bit in Shadowlands trying to get it. It does okay damage. You can get it going okay damage, but the reality is you're sacrificing healing to do so, where Disc Priest can do both. So, the way Priest has been in the past has always been one has been dominant or the other. I don't know how to really... I don't want to steer this class wrong, but I will say this. Holy has one particular playstyle, and it's fun, and it works, and it's good for output. Disc has had multiple different playstyles throughout history, and they always tend to be fun when they're based around damage and then healing. And it's okay for one expansion, I think, for Disc to be really, really good, and then maybe Holy not be so good. But also, I'm not opposed to having both of them be good, but have different strengths, right? So one of them's HPS and one of them's damage. There's plenty of situations where Disc is weak because it can't do the throughput because it needs to be able to damage a target, right? If you can't damage a target, you can't get the output that you want to get, right? So it becomes very min-maxing. The better your DPS gets, sometimes targets will die faster than you can get your stuff off, and now there's a whole nother issue you're having, right? So I think there's already a situation where Holy Priests are better in situations, and I had to do that myself. I had to switch to Holy for a while on my raids because we were a very, very much lower skill set with my friends, and I needed just throughput, and I couldn't get the throughput. Although I was healing close to the same amount, actually, I'm not gonna lie, with disc, the kind of healing I was doing was much different. So, and you kind of figure that out when you play healer. So I needed burst single target healing, and this piece didn't supply that. So, yeah, let's say long story short, I agree this is a huge mistake, and hopefully they can fix that. Are they going to fix the mix? Probably not. That just means you were going on 2 expansions of the same playstyle, and honestly, them pushing farther into one playstyle, which is just not fun, right? You want to be able to have more abilities to play however you want to play.
Yeah, it's just something I know has become a much bigger deal year on year. And there are certain classes, like playing Mistweaver, you can talent fully into doing melee healing, yet you feel like you're doing 10 times as much work as a Holy Paladin and getting absolutely nothing for it, while weaving in procs and things like that. And those guys just feel like, what's the point? You know, if I'm going to have to compete against this level of thing.
Yeah, agreed. Right. And I think we've seen it become more and more prominent because I think community sophistication continues to improve, and people, value this more and more. I think the mark of a good healer of other specs is weaving in damage when you have empty GCDs. It's not just about your HPS, it's about what damage you can do. And so the couple of specs that excel in both regards are rightly, considered as such. It's something we need to make adjustments for.
Okay. Another big concern that I had from the Raider friends was obviously the effect of raid cooldowns, individual buffs. This covers a lot of ground, Ian. This is from PI and certainly Anti-Magic Zone. Especially from the melee friends out there who look at the very limited raid spots they get amongst all those specs. Yet when something like AMZ is just as good as it is, 2 of those are taken instantly by DKs because they're just making the fight so much easier. And I know there's been some back and forth in previous interviews about we don't want to just give everybody a raid buff. We don't just want to do X and Y, but it's certainly causing frustration, I think is the word we're looking for. I'm wondering what your internal thinking on this is.
AMZ is too good.
That's, oh no! Sorry, Death Knights. I'm so sorry.
I mean, you convinced me. I thought it was fine, but then you stated the case
AMZ,
so eloquently.
you said, Mike, was it?
And okay, problem solved. Nerf AMZ. I mean, I was. This is something we talk about a bunch. I think I was watching. I think Max had a video recently on raid comps and melee slots, and he was also making the point of like, there's this finite number of melee slots, which separately we would like to increase, but that's more of an encounter design question. And you're currently allocating.
Man, Death Knights keep getting shit on and shit on.
Having a tool like AMZ is awesome. Having tools like Darkness and other things are awesome. I think AMZ is just
right.
Something like that potentially, yes. And rogues, I think, are lacking actually in raid utility.
Agreed.
Rogues can definitely use something there. I think rogues have it covered in dungeons, but when it comes down to, currently looking at your raid comp, there aren't enough reasons to say, oh no, we can't sit the rogue because blank. Like, what is that blank? There needs to be something. With AMZ, it's just a question of magnitude. Honestly, in most situations, arguably, like AMZ is perhaps better than a major cooldown like Power Word Barrier.
They do expose armor or shiv. They can bring those 2 things back, one of the 2.
Versus 25% on a 3-minute cooldown. You probably take the former in a lot of cases.
Yes.
And you can stack them easily. That's not great, right? One of the things we're discussing, we want to make some changes here. One of the things we're discussing is actually bringing back, like AMZ long time ago used to have a total absorption cap, kind of like a stronger version of Earth and Wall Totem. I think there's probably some version where it's still good. It's effectively not nerfed at all for dungeon use, or you're dropping it on a flag in a battleground or whatever. But you're not getting quite the effectiveness that you are using it on Denathrius or Council in a 20+ raid group. And we want it to be useful, but not quite the just amazing all-purpose solution that it is now.
Yeah, I was so glad I do not have my chat open right now. I know I'm in for it. But I will ask about the ferals as well.
Well deserved, Preach. What the
I absolutely adore playing feral. It's one of those specs that feels like it needs to be 20 to 30% ahead to even be considered these days as being in there. It's such a hard thing. I don't envy your position here, Ian, by any means. It's like, do you just give something to everybody and call it good, or do you take things away? But with the melee specifically, it does feel like there's 10 specs for so few spots. So maybe that's an overall thing with ranged being just more beneficial.
That's really what it boils down to. I mean, one of the things we're hesitant to go back down the road of is spec specific.
All right, as a former mythic top US, I guess, raid leader, I always mix. Now, here's the problem with World of Warcraft right now is that there's so many melee, and there's not enough range classes. This is going to cause you to have melee heavy comps, which melee heavy could just mean you have 7 melee and 7 range, right? I typically count Demon Hunters as ranged. If you've ever been on my raids, you know that. But they're not, right? They're not. They're just really mobile. Monks too. So I get it. And they do need to balance things a little bit more. But what they need to do is add range classes to the game. They could add a range class the next 2 expansions, and I think it would then, at that point, balance things out. They don't have a bard class, and I don't think they have a tinkerer yet, right? So those are 2 things they can make range. They can also give demon hunters a range spec. Those are things they could do, okay? Yeah, they're just, that's the biggest issue with this is that. For raid cooldowns, you cannot give everybody a raid cooldown. We've already been through certain expansions where most did, right? And then those classes got picked, and if you didn't have a raid cooldown, it was like, why are we bringing you? Giving rogues more? Okay, I don't know. All right, so what they could do is they bring back Shiv. Shiv it gets rid of enrage effects. They could also give what was the other one? Shiv and damn it, I just said it. Anyways, there's 2 abilities I can give them. I know Shiv is one of them. I forgot the other one I said was. You can give those back, right? That wouldn't be too big of a deal. One of those 2 back. I wouldn't give them too much. Rogues have a lot of advantages, right? They typically are good at soaking. They can soak things, and maybe this raid tier, there isn't anything that's overwhelmingly strong for rogues, right? Doesn't mean we give them something, you know. They're good at soaking. They have an immunity that's on like a minute cooldown. They can soak a lot as a rogue, right? Which we know Team Garrus rogues were exploited for that reason, right? With Feint and Cloak of Shadows, right? And their Chi Death. So they have these strengths. There's not right now the go-to strength, right? And Death Knights are, which how often does that happen, right? Death Knights being the strong go-to class, not really very often, right? And let's be honest, Frost has been getting crapped on left and right, and Unholy has been catered to multiple times, right? It's just, I don't know. I see them crapping on that as like, man, like whoever's doing the Death Knight class design has no interest in Frost DK at all. And just, I hate seeing the class in general take a hit because I know it's going to hurt Frost more. And I have friends that are Frost DKs. They like Frost specifically. And it's just sad seeing them take all these hits. And it's like, man, you guys aren't really, you're not helping them. You know what I mean? And if that could help you get a raid slot, like, dude, you know, that's an advantage. Now, obviously, in the top end, they probably aren't going Frost. They have to go Unholy. But, man, like, you just kicking the dog that's already down, man. So, I don't know. Let's go ahead and listen and see what they have to say. But with raid cooldowns and all this stuff, just because one class isn't super strong this raid tier doesn't mean it's not going to be next raid tier. Sometimes rogues have been known just for being heavy damage dealers, right? They don't bring anything. So, you know, that's something to think about. But we can't have rogues be too strong because then they get out of control in PvP. So, just things to think about. And then dungeons, they have sap and they have invisibility, so we know they're fine in dungeons. But I don't know if they need a raid cooldown or something more. They already have plenty, in my honest opinion.
Specific utility where it's like this particular spec of a class brings a unique benefit that makes people feel like they need to respec or should, you know, go as that thing. It's more about, you know, class level utility that we're trying to emphasize. And druids have tons of great utility. It's just that it feels like it's so often better provided by, let's say, your Moonkin currently. And that's a little bit of a, you know, broader spec balance issue. But a lot of this just comes down to how many slots are seen as viable for melee in raids. I think it was interesting. It's an interesting discussion. Getting back to that Max video I mentioned earlier, like he kind of took it as a given that yeah, there's like 5 melee spots, right? You have 14 DPS, you basically have 5 melee and 9 ranged, and then within that, this is the calculus. Like we need to raise that number, and one of the questions that we're asking ourselves in discussion among the combat team and the encounter team is how can we make it the right answer to bring 7, ideally 8 melee. Right? If you have 14 DPS, bring 7 of each. Right? Why isn't that the starting point, and then you tweak it one way or the other? And in that world, it'd be much easier to justify a much more diverse raid composition. Right? I think that currently it feels like, oh, you can't possibly justify more than 1 rogue, but meanwhile you have 3 mages over there, or 3 warlocks, or 3 hunters, and you don't think anything of it. And so that's the angle we're trying to tackle this from. But
yeah, just be wary of listening to Zoomers like Max, because
I know.
They're a bit all over the place, these youngins.
But yeah, it's getting back to the general topic of utility. I think we're happy with with what things like AMZ or Death Grip or Stampeding Roar or whatever bring to the raid. The strongest raid should be a diverse one with all classes represented, and we can create situations where those classes and specs get to shine, get to have their hero moments, where you're building your strat around, okay, the priest is going to go over here and life grip the tank across the gap or whatever else. Like, we want those tools to exist and be special. And so it's just a question of, again, as always, finding a middle ground and navigating the competing pressures from all sides.
Okay. We did that.
We've only got a couple of minutes. So
life grip. So it's happening, right? So, for example, we had a very melee heavy group, and we would use our death grips on, or life grips on slower DPS. So they would use their, let's just say they have whatever the Death Knights have, they're on faster, right? And they use that one mechanic. Then they're slow the next one, they can't make it, right? Or they mess up and now they're too slow for sure. They hit mechanics. We would use our life grips. That's already there. It's already being used. Windrush totems are already being used. All these mobility things are being used in melee heavy comps. Is it fully optimal? No. Why? Because range can do DPS and be mobile enough to do what they need to do at the same time. That's why range is more priority and high. Now, it trickles down, but yeah, I've downed bosses that are damn near impossible to kill with a full melee comp. I've done it. I had on one of my servers that was dying, I had a full 100% full melee comp, and we killed Mythic, the Twin Dragons and Emerald Nightmare with a 100% melee comp. We killed it on Mythic. Like, it was doable. Not very fun. It was very, very difficult, but we did it, right? So is it possible? Yeah. Is it easier? No, not at all. No, you can drive with your feet if you want to, but it's just easier to drive with your hands, right? So that's the thing, right? So you have the path of least resistance, which is what everyone's trying to go with. So I get it, but you can count monks and demon hunters as ranged DPS. That is what I did, and I made them, and I made sure they were aware of that. They're not going to get the 100% parse unless we were able to move things around. Unfortunately, that's just a part of raiding. All right, so. But I think the best way to fix this is to add ranged classes. And so there's more ranged classes to pick from, and there's more. This will spread out the player base between ranged and melee more. Not 100%. Some people just like playing melee, but there's more people that might be open to playing a really cool Tinker or a really cool this. It'll start spreading it out. And people like playing the new class, so that'll take off some melee. I hope, and it'll spread out what kind of range we have. And I would really like to see some more interesting range classes. Honestly, Demon Hunter didn't go too well. I think it's very simple. But there's some really cool range classes they can make. There's a couple of them. So whichever ones they pick, I'm very interested to see. I think a Bard could be one of them. I think a Bard would be really, really cool. And I've been waiting for a Bard to be added to World of Warcraft for a very long time. So if they can add a Bard, that'd be sweet. If not, hey, it is what it is. A Demon Hunter could get a range class for sure. There's a lot of things they could do, right? So I'm I'm hoping they just go that route. That's my honest hope. But yeah.
A couple of questions that people desperately want me to ask. How do you feel the AoE cap is working out overall in terms of Mythic Plus? Do you think it was a good idea, or is there some room for maneuver there? Because it does feel pretty horrible. If certainly even everybody from Transmoggers to high Mythic Pluses do feel kind of awkward with the way the AoE cap is actually implemented.
Yeah, I mean, there's definite room for continued evolution there. I mean, certainly for legacy content farming and things like that. That's not really the point. This wasn't a new design. In many ways, this was going back to how abilities like Whirlwind and other things have traditionally worked. I think the way Mythic Plus, there's a lot that we're talking about, in terms of the dynamic of Mythic Plus in general. Certainly, there's this feedback loop of uncapped AoE being so potentially strong if you can do giant pulls. Therefore, the way to approach dungeons is to do giant pulls. But then also, you can't survive face tanking those pulls. So now the way to tank is to kite everything. There's this kind of general feedback loop there. We still hold to the goal of niches and wanting there to be people who excel at 4-target cleave, at 2-target cleave, people who excel at more traditional 10-target AoE or whatever else. And I think we're moving in the right direction, but we have a lot of work still to do. And certainly a world where uncapped AoE is still king, but only a handful of people get it is not where we want to end up.
No, the scaling gets pretty wacky on that
very
quickly. Very, very quickly. One last question for you. What is World Quest 2.0? Because I know it sounds very memey, but genuinely, I'm very confused. I say I did all these alt characters recently, and I couldn't think of a single reason to go and do World Quests or callings. It was very off-putting. They just seem to be longer, is how it felt. Was that like something that didn't get explored fully in development, and there's more to come there, or was the idea just for less but longer?
It's not really fewer so much as I think one of the biggest things that has to do with the place or lack thereof of world quests in the current endgame loop is the lack of artifact power. I don't know that anyone is clamoring for the return of that, but it always felt like going back to
Absolutely
Legion,
not.
that was the
Do not bring
primary
that back.
reason. Like in Legion, you needed world quests for artifact power from your emissary cache as well, and early on for legendaries and the chance at legendaries from your emissary. In BFA, it was pretty similar. If you were trying to get AP, you'd clear the map. Right now it's the best way to get anima, but that is pretty much an entirely optional system, and some folks engage with it, some folks don't. Our goal with changing world quests to add, to make them longer, add multiple stages to some of them, was actually to shift the ratio of doing content time to travel time. And if Brexit felt like by late BFA especially, world quests were like, I spend 85% of my time traveling from place to place, and like 15% of my time, killing this one mob or rounding up these things and quickly clicking them and then moving on to the next space. And the goal was just, hey, more time not on your mount, using your class abilities, playing the game. But we agree that where we've landed, the rewards loop is not one that is really terribly satisfying or rewarding for a ton of people. 9.1 offers a chance to change that to some extent going forward. But as we evaluate the role of world quests, we want depth and variety, but also a reason for people to do them that isn't just an AP grind.
Okay. If I could leave on a teaser, one of the best features I've had in World of Warcraft for a long time was the Mage Tower. And it gets brought up in every interview you have, I'm sure. But 9.2, you mentioned there's some pretty huge things on the horizon there. Are we looking to that? Because I also remember, to clarify the scene, I remember how miserably it was initially received. Because so many players just couldn't do the Mage Tower until the Tomb of Sargeras gear catch-up caught up. But then it became overwhelmingly popular. Is there anything that there's a solo adventure, a solo challenge that people can plug away at, work at, something
Mage
like that?
Mage Tower was
that
awesome.
Torghast, which, like you said earlier, is designed to be won. Is there something like that in the works? Not a repeat, obviously, but something like that?
Nothing exactly like the Mage Tower in the near term, but we share your love for it and the community's affection for it, and it's something that we want to find another place for. Some of it is also, the idea for the Mage Tower actually started from the rewards. Like, we had these artifact appearances that were incredible that we wanted to give out, wanted to come up with a way to give them out. And so
Yeah.
we had, hey, you get this one from doing organized raid content, you get this one from doing PvP. What if we have one that's all about solo achievement? And I think we need something that makes that like a carrot is kind of a carrot, carrot on a stick is kind of a crappy phrase for it, but it's like, what's the thing that's so exciting that makes you want to persevere, that makes you want to go through all of that learning, all of that progression, and make it feel worthwhile in the end. And when we have something like that to give out, I think a Mage Tower like system is pretty much at the top of our list for the kind of thing we would want to build.
So it's more a case of you're looking for the report, that you're looking for an appropriate reward rather than not building it. Okay, that's interesting. Would you welcome suggestions from all these people about something that may be good?
Yeah, I mean, and I see in chat, and some of it is also not necessarily global either. I saw in chat some mentions of like Green Fire for Warlocks. That was another great example, right? That turned into a solo challenge for people because we had something cool we wanted to give out, and we built something around it. That's something we want to continue to do, and it may not be for everybody. It might be for one class, but it's more we can do.
That's superb. I want to thank you for your time again.
Yeah, don't do it for one class. That'd be lame.
Yeah, likewise. Always fun chatting.
Soon we should be able to actually, see each other. IRL.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I think I still owe you a beer from the last time. It should be
Sounds
good.
like a plan. Hopefully a real BlizzCon at some point.
All right, so there you have it. I covered some of the things in there that I was like, right. Overall, the answers are probably about a 5 out of 10, right? Like I wasn't very happy with some of the answers. Some of the answers were just realistic, right? Some things are just there, and they're going to react a certain way, and you can't really afford to change or mess with them because it'll break other systems. And some things are just bad design that for whatever reason they created it that way. It's not like there wasn't this information given to them in the past. It's not like they weren't given information in the beta or whatever the case may be, and they just decided to ignore it and go with their custom design, which again, I kind of understand to a certain extent, right? You create the system, and you think it's going to work one way, and you want to see it play out, and then ultimately you're wrong, right? But there's after so many points where you have to say, you know what, we need this to be good, and let's make sure we're thorough on this and make sure we're not making mistakes. And I think World of Warcraft is in that situation now. They can't afford to mess up Shadowlands, and I think they're in the process of messing it up. I think it's an okay expansion at best right now, and they could easily teeter-totter in either direction. They can go worse, or they can go be a passable expansion. I hope they go the passable route, because right now they're losing players from the drought, and the character design, the balancing, everything, the chores, everything is just pushing people away. You have games like ESO, Final Fantasy, they're out right now. New World's coming. There's going to be other games to play, and they're going to be putting pressure on World of Warcraft. And I don't know if they have that it factor anymore to bring everyone right back. So we'll find out. 9.1 is supposed to be a big deal, but it sounds like it's kind of a ways away. Which that means there is a potential of New World. If I could guess, they're trying to aim for New World release to kind of put this out. I think it's in June. So that's where I think they're going to try and hit with the 9.1. Is it going to work? I don't know. I'm very hyped for New World. I hope that it turns out like we want it to turn out. Amazon has been working with the community very, very well. World of Warcraft it feels out of touch. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to respec your conduits or whatever you want to call them, soul binds. You should be able to do that relatively easily. Let people have fun with the content. There's no reason you should get in the way of that. Yeah. There's a lot of things on here. I just don't understand it. The AoE cap I kind of understand from Mythic Plus a little bit. Tanking wasn't really tanking anymore, But I don't know. Maybe there's another way they can go about it. Besides just taking the AoE cap away, because there is a little bit of fun there was fun when having a fire mage and just grabbing as many mobs as you could and just going fucking bonkers, right? That was fun, right? Is it good for the game? I don't know, but it was fun. So there's just a lot of things in here. Raid cooldowns, all this, a lot of raid involved stuff. which is where I'm good at. So I have to say, overall, I wasn't impressed. The raid came in shambles. You need to release the raid at least in a decent place. You can't have it overtuned or like by a significant margin. It's not going to work out. Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of things going on with World of Warcraft, mostly around class balance. Like I said, they just focus on class balance for an expansion. I would not have an issue, and then just adding classes or specs. That would take the game a long way. Add more range classes. So that's my advice to Ian. Going forward, focus on class balance. See if we can get them as balanced as possible. It won't be hard to find really, really good players for every class. Even one that might be able to play multiple classes. Get them balanced relatively well. PvP and PvP. And PvE, and make sure that we start adding in some range classes. It wouldn't even be a bad idea to add another healer or another tank, right? Let's make this thing more unique, more diverse, which I know I'm asking for diversity and balance, which is very, very hard, but those are the recipe for success, right? So maybe a bard for the next class, right? Give us the healer, and then give us a DPS spec on that, right? Very simple. Chords do damage, maybe some cool effects, buffs, and heals coming from that class. Be very, very fun. Having different instruments give different buffs or DPS, right? Could be cool. Could be really cool. So, yeah. Anyways, that's me, guys. Just me today. This is Tarnish. This is MMO Avengers, and we're out.